All right.
Good afternoon. Good morning for you.
Morning and afternoon.
Hello.
More people already. Barry, Stacy, Colin, Glenn.
A lot of very.
I think Patricia Pereira said she maybe joined today.
How y'all doing?
Good. I'm going to be off camera most of the time because I have to get ready to leave right after this call.
You know, speaking of traveling, I was hoping Kayla would be able to do a session here with me while she was up here in the Seattle area, but she's out gallivanting and sightseeing and eating all the fun stuff.
She's on today, right?
No, because of that, she has to postpone yet another time because she's out seeing the sights. I think today she's out on the Olympic Peninsula.
Okay.
So, unless anyone has an alternative, I do have something which I did write up and I did circulate that I am prepared to lead a discussion on. Anyone else?
Well, I should mention that we talked about to do a session on the Schmachtenberger-Weinstein dialogue, but then I'd like some time to prepare. So maybe that could be next week or after that. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you've actually written quite a lot on that already. So if you'd like to, you're welcome to go. But if you'd like to take a bit more time, absolutely. So you you can actually decide which goes first. If one of you is ready next week, that's great. Okay?
Yeah,
right.
I would prefer to at least prepare some more. Yeah.
All right. Well, the thing that I wrote up and the thing that I circulated was immediately after last week's session. I don't know if you guys recall. I sent around a list of questions, which in my opinion, help us focus, help us reach closure, help us assess how fruitful was each session. And let's welcome a new member here. Let's wait till she gets here. Patricia, welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you here. So we just barely started and we were going through what we were about to talk about today. Our format is that we ask people to write up a topic and circulate it sometime prior to the session. And then we decide, which one of those offerings we will focus on, maybe one or two or three of them in the Saturday session. Last week, Glenn wrote up a very extensive, very thoughtful piece about leadership and agreements. So last week, we talked about that. This week, I have an offering, which is what do we ask ourselves after a session so that we can achieve focus, hopefully some sense making, and hopefully some progress, if you want to dare use that word, towards what it is that we care about. So anyway, that's just a little bit about the format, and I'll talk about more about barn raising, but as far as I remember though, this is probably your first visit to barn raising, is it? You're on mute, by the way, Patricia.
Yes, for me it is, yes.
Okay, good. So, not to put you on the spot, but we will probably introduce ourselves briefly and then ask you to do the same, not so briefly, if you're okay with that.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Can I pick people in random order and just going around in the display of my own session here? Glenn, would you like to introduce yourself briefly? And I would ask you to include also where you're from so that we have a sense of time zone. Okay.
Sure. I'm Glenn, and I'm living a little bit outside of Oslo in Norway. And I've joined quite a number of these meetings for the last 3 years or so. And very interested in sense making and co-visioning and learning more about the opportunities in terms of the global futures and really all kinds of questions that come up, just the process of communication and the many people you can meet in these kind of meetings and networks. So yeah, I'm just here to participate today with whatever comes up.
Thank you, Glenn. Mr. Barry.
My name is Barry Court. I'm a retired systems scientist. I've been on the internet since before Al Gore invented it. My specialty is research on the theory of emotions and learning. I live in the suburbs of Boston, and I've been in GCC since last October when Stacy invited me to begin participating.
Actually, since you offered that little trivia bit, what year do you consider the internet having been invented?
Well, it depends on what you mean by invented, because it was the ARPANET, which was developed progressively since I think the late 1960s. And in fact, the very first contract from ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Administration, to develop what eventually did become the internet was awarded to a little company not far from where I live called BBN, Bolt, Beranek, and Newman. And I worked there in the 1990s. So I worked for the company that created the original technology of the internet, but this is already after it was well available to the general public.
Okay, thanks, Barry. And okay, so you were from Boston, right? So you mentioned that. Ms. Stacy. You're on mute, by the way, Stacy.
I'm from New York, and I'm interested in anything related to emotions and whatever they pertain to. And I have spoken to Patricia in the past. And yeah, I only stayed on camera this long because she was here. So now I'm going to go off camera, but I'll be listening. Nice to see you, Patricia.
Thanks, Stace. Mr. Thies.
Yes, hello, I'm from the Netherlands, living in Delft. I'm teaching vocational training, road building, sewage systems, and I'm here for solving global challenges, actually, to listen from around the world what the ideas are. And what we find out is actually understanding each other is a huge problem already here in this group. So which is nice to experience, because if we solve it for the planet. So we'll continue to try. So that's, I like this meeting, and Sam is doing a great job with boundaries. So I'm grateful.
Thank you, Thies. Mr. Alex.
Hello, I'm Mr. Alex Reed from Down Under, and this is an attempt to collaborate with change makers around the globe. So connecting people with links and web pages and websites and ventures and projects and collaborative co-visioning is what it seems to be developing here amongst this group of people and many others linked via the global network. So that's where it is. It's voting on what you like and focusing on where your attention is taken is how these groups are evolving in an organic fashion with augmented intelligence. Over.
Thanks, Alex. Mr. Cullen, if it's your option.
Yes, I'm here. I'm typically off camera because I'm here and there, but I expect to be on camera a little later. I'm from the tip or the edge of Canada in the Maritimes, in a little province called New Brunswick. I do software development and that kind of thing, but here I'm more looking at the coexistence of the global, the coexistence vision for people. So that's kind of what Sam is heading up here. I think we've tried to vision, we've tried to understand each other. It's very difficult. So going around and around, I am now focused on what is a fair conversation. What is a fair conversation, and how do you know one's happening? So tools or indicators or ways that people can lean in and really know that they're agreeing on something that they jointly understand, as opposed to agreeing on something or disagreeing on something that they don't jointly understand. So you can't have a fair conversation without understanding. So like Tees was saying, I think for me, this group has become about how do we have fair conversations so we can understand each other, so we can make agreements, so that we can put things in priority. And I find that there's always a conflict between top down and bottom up. And I wonder what technology has to facilitate that, and also what dangers lie in letting technology facilitate that. So it's wide open, and yeah, welcome.
Okay, I'll go. This group, Patricia, actually stop me if you already know something about the Global Challenges Foundation. Do you know about them and why GCC exists?
I'm not too familiar. No, I've seen some of the. So I've been following the page, and but yeah, I haven't looked really into.
Then I'll fill in a little bit for you, and the rest of the people here can see how consistent I am in this presentation. Okay, so in about 30 or 45 seconds, this group was formed because a couple of us, Tony Lee Meyer and I, pressed the submit button to send a proposal to the Global Challenges Foundation in September 30th of 2017, almost 4 years ago. The challenge from that foundation, on which they put up a $5 million award, was to propose new methods of global governance, seeing as how the current system seemed to be lacking in some way or other, okay? So eventually the theme that Tammy and I selected for that particular proposal was to see how we can get the best of all contributions and learn how to make better ideas out of good ideas via really listening, really learning conversation, and really working through our blocks. That proposal got sent in, but it was not, of course, awarded anything because there were like 2,000 submissions across the world. And by the way, there's a minor controversy, some of you may not know, because the foundation did not award the entire $5 million. And there's a scandal around that. But anyway, Tammy and I decided that regardless of whether or not we got the award, we would practice what we believe anyway. So we wanted to have these conversations so that people can come together and we can figure out, how does this good idea from this person and this good idea from that person come together and create another, hopefully better idea, and then do that with more and more people. Now, throughout all of that, I've come to understand that a large part of what we're trying to do is talk about co-visioning, really trying to imagine the future we want to live in together. And in order to do that, we need to make sense out of what is going on around us. That includes language issues, that includes emotion issues, that includes representation issues, science, religion, all of those issues there. It also means we have to learn how to co-create. We can't just say, oh, collaboration means you work for me, okay? Or collaboration means you have to pay me, right? That's the old notion of collaboration. Fundamental in all this is also the notion of agreement. If we don't have agreement, how do we get anywhere? And that theme, by the way, has been a real blocking point for us for quite a while. And I think we're about turning the corner on that one. So we're beginning to appreciate the value of agreements and how they might enable and empower us. throughout all of this, whatever keeps us from doing all of this good stuff that we want to do, I clumped together in a field of study called collaborology, which is how do successful collaborations scale? Now, one of the fun things I collect out of this collaborology thing is a group of things that I call tongue-in-cheek smart people problems. In other words, smart people get together, they converse, they try to do good things. Not many of them actually go very far. Why is that? So I have a list of over 24, approaching 36 smart people problems now. There's another list called dumb people problems, which is actually much longer, okay? It's much easier to understand. Now, the last piece of this is that I wrote on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, very large font, 4 practices that I and a couple of friends developed way back about 8 or 9 years ago. And those practices are just opt-in practices, which if you desire to embrace and practice, you will automatically, in my terminology, join a community of impact. And those practices include doing good. Whatever you think good means, do it, but be explicit and be transparent about it. Be accountable to yourself and to at least 2 others, because you can't really take a look at yourself all by yourself. There's filters that one has in front of one's eyes. So typically you need a couple of very loving, very candid, very trusted advisors to really say, here's how you're doing on this. And then for those people who are embodying this practice, to connect and to build this community in an opt-in way and to try and co-create something. So that's basically the community of impact, as I call it, okay? So anything that actually keeps us from doing this, any co-visioning, keeps us from sense-making, keeps us from co-creating, keeps us from making agreements, keeps us from collaborating, keeps us from building the community, are blockers that we try to lean into. So one of the issues that we really had to learn and overcome is discomfort turns some people off. Here, we try to lean into discomfort. We try to lean into misunderstanding. We try to lean into missed expectations so that we can really get to the bottom of why that actually happened. Okay, so that's barn raising. There is a group called Unblocking where we actually try to do some of that unblocking, but all of what I was just talking about is specific to right now what I'm calling barn raising in this particular Saturday session. So that's what GCC and barn raising is to me. It's not an official version, it's a personal version because we're still trying to reach those agreements about what is official and what is not, okay? So a little bit about me, I'm actually just virtually between Seattle and Vancouver, up in Washington State in the San Juan Islands in a little place called Camano Island. And I actually work for a software company in Sunnyvale, California, where I used to be the engineering lead, but now they've allowed me to relinquish those responsibilities, and now they just call me technology evangelist. So I get to do pretty much special things and also a little bit of whatever I want. So that's a bit of introduction from all the rest of us, a little bit longer from me because I wanted to give you that GCC background. So if you're willing, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what time zone you're in, what draws you to this, and what would you like to get out of it, and what would actually keep you from coming back?
Okay, so hi everybody, lovely to meet you. So I'm Patricia, and so I'm a graphic designer, and I'm living in Peterborough, which is just above London. So I can get to London in 15 minutes fast train. And yes, I'm very passionate about social justice, and I'm really into designing, problem solving, system thinking, cognitive science. So those are all really big interests for me, and so I've been interested in as well in activism, part of the Zeitgeist movement and the Occupy movement, and so that was when, because I've always had the understanding that the world was not okay. The world as as the society we've constructed, and so because very young I would read Science et Vie and Science et Vie Junior, and have it's the equivalent of Nature in France, because that's where I was born. So I was born in France. But my parents are Portuguese, so I ended up moving to Portugal. So I'm actually Portuguese, but with a French accent. So I used to read those magazines, and I could tell, obviously, having the very scientific perspective, how we are polluting the planet, how we are not producing efficiently, and all the waste. And so I've, since a very young age, I would go to sleep dreaming about how would I design a new society, or, how would I create new architecture, more efficient. And so that's how I would fall asleep usually, or imagine, daydreaming. But I always felt like maybe I was very isolated. Like I didn't realize that there were more people thinking about, how our society is absolutely wrong, how everything is not the most efficient, and as we could do. So until I came across the Zeitgeist movies, in which I realized that not only I wasn't the only one seeing those things, so there was possibly a movement of people being created to do things about it. So at that moment, I kind of became really much, I fell in love with the idea of this movement of people coming together to change things. And I really mean that, falling in love, because it was as in, when you go to sleep and you think about someone, and you wake up and you think about someone when you're in love. It was the same thing, but with the concept of, changing the world, basically. And so that led to extremely productive time, in which I came, like, very creative ideas just really basically flooded me. And I made, so I kind of started designing in my head, the tool that would allow people to organize themselves differently. And that's it. And from that time, so that was around 10 years ago, more, 12 years ago, I've been adding more ideas, because I always try to problem solve. So I see a problem and I try to analyze what is really the root of the problem. Because once you get to that, the solution, when you actually identify correctly the real problem, the root of the problem, usually the solution just pops out. So I see problem solving, the most important part of problem solving is to actually correctly define the source of the problem. So I've been doing that, but in between I've become a mother, and I'm trying to survive in this society, whilst, so I need to obviously, put food on the table. And well, it just comes in the way of dedicating myself to my life project, as I see it, which is the tool. And yes, so I've been mainly, since that time, networking. And so on the internet, on Facebook, there was some conversation where I saw Glenn talking and having a very clear vision, of things. I related a lot, so I thought it would be interesting for us to talk and have a chat, and we did. And then I kind of asked how could he, how he would see himself contributing to what I was talking about, and he suggested those meetings for networking, and so and it's not the first time obviously that I heard about it, because obviously Stacey talked about it before, and so I've seen it before. A lot of things popping out in my feed, my Facebook feed, and I've been keeping an eye, of course. But that's the first time that I was really kind of invited to join, and so I thought, I have the opportunity, and that would be really interesting to meet really other really interesting people and see what they are up to. You are mute.
I hope you fulfilled the prerequisites before joining. Did you actually complete viewing all the other 500 videos, each of which is 2 hours long?
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding, okay? I'm just kidding.
Actually, we don't have time for that.
Just to let you know, we know that we record all of these sessions, and I hope you're aware that we record all these sessions.
Yeah, it's fine.
And Colin recently, in the last few months or weeks, has actually put together a nice tool that allows you to search for any word or group of words, and it shows you where in each video that word or phrase was uttered, and you can actually click on that link and go immediately to that video and actually
That's awesome. Yeah.
So Colin's actually made huge progress towards making this corpus of knowledge of videos usable and navigable. So if there's anything in particular, like for example, if you're looking for the word occupy, for example, you'll probably search for that and find several videos, probably many videos, where occupy is mentioned. Just FYI. Are you not hearing me? Can anybody hear me? Is my audio coming through loud or weak?
Can you crank it up a couple of notches?
Okay, let me see.
A little bit weak, but it's pretty good.
All right, let me check.
I'd say it's about half of Patricia's.
Testing. Testing. Is that any better?
A little better.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think you're good.
Barry, I think it's about 4.5 dB, okay? All right, so we have recently come to a one of many different formats. So one format is entirely free conversation, where people just say what's on their mind, and people just can go wherever they want. Okay, that was a very free form version. We had another thing which some people call deep dives, where we actually allocate an entire Saturday to a person, and that person could take an hour, hour and a half, or whatever, hour and 45 minutes to just go deep into a topic or set of topics that they want to. I just request a few minutes at the end just to ask some focusing questions at the end, just to see if we actually all thought that was progressing towards some mutual understanding, and a few other debriefing questions. We have also agreed recently that rather than always do these free-form conversations, which are very unfocused, we are gradually appreciating focus more and more. So we are recommending that if someone really has a topic, to write it up and circulate it sometime during the week prior to Saturday, so that then that becomes something that one knows, hey, somebody's put some thought into this. They actually think it's important enough to actually present it in a well-conceived, well-presented way. And then it doesn't need to be a presentation, but at least that is used as a focusing topic and a focusing artifact, okay? And that's what Glenn did last week. Glenn had a very nicely written, very long essay about something that I thought was actually quite timely. This week, I wrote up at the end of last week's session a set of questions which I'm hoping will help us focus and help us guide our conversations if we know that those questions are coming at the end. So those questions are here. I'm going to share that link right now in the chat, okay? And some of you will recognize this. I actually sent this right after last Saturday's session. So that is one candidate focusing artifact for today. And so I'm looking for other candidate focusing artifacts. If there are none, then by default, we go into a free form format. But if at least if 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or n artifacts were shared. And by the way, Facebook posts are valid, blogs are valid, videos that you found compelling, if you have commentary on them, are valid. You know, almost any books are all valid. We're just asking for some artifact that people can review that it will help us focus, okay? So Glenn, I see you copied them down. I actually revised them slightly from my original delivery, but that's in the link. So there's a lot of overlap there, okay? So that is my contribution this week towards a focusing topic. Anyone have any feedback, or shall we launch into it?
I was just wondering, yeah.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I was kind of wondering what do you have in mind that we discuss the questions, or
the focus I think is this. In other words, if we have this list of questions that we know is going to be coming at the end, does it help us focus? Does it help us guide our own conversation? Does it let us each assess whether we move towards sense-making, co-creation, collaboration, unblocking, etc.? This might be too long a list. I wouldn't ask it verbally every single time, but I would ask each of us to review it after every session so that hopefully it just becomes part of our DNA. Maybe that's a little bit too ambitious. Okay, maybe not DNA. Memory, maybe. Okay? And in particular, I'm looking for any of these questions would may be inappropriate or otherwise worthy of discussion. So in brief, it's about focus, it's about moderation, it's about learning, it's about sense making, it's about whether we have augmented our own or a collective vision. Did we actually move towards coexistence? Coexistence, by the way, another good word that I like. Was our memory individually or collectively augmented? Did we actually make any agreements, or did we propose any agreements? Did I agree to take specific action? Did anybody else decide to take specific action? Did we see triggers? Did we see issues that we need to unblock? Did anyone just talk and talk and ramble and ramble and ramble and defocus? And did we deal with that well? Was anyone not heard? Was anyone just sort of leaning back, you know, just frowning the entire time? Okay. And did we have fun? So that's my list of candidate questions that I thought would be useful for myself in assessing these conversations. If there's general agreement, nothing to talk about, then we're done. We can have free-form conversation.
I'd like to add a little bit.
Okay,
Sorry, go ahead,
Glenn
John.
and Colin, how's that?
Yeah, Colin can go first.
Colin, you can go first.
Well, thank you, Glenn. That's so kind of you. I just wanted to quickly add that I find that I bang the same drum all the time, which is context and understanding. I think those are the two big words. If you don't pass through the gate of understanding and context, you don't know where you are. So I'm thinking that when people would present something, it may be a continuation. So we may want to say, is this a new idea? Does this idea build on somebody else's idea? Or are you just continuing and you're giving us an update on how you're making out with what you think is going to make things better or good? Like, what is your good? What are you trying to do? And within there, I see narratives that need to be lined up, narratives that don't fit, narratives that do fit, and also frustrations, so that you can see those conflict points. And that's what I would like to see come part of our memory. And I think it is part of our DNA. It's called gossip, but we just got to get it right.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I believe Glenn was next, followed by Alex.
Yeah, well, this reminds me a little bit of because we've had several periods before where something like the deep dives have been practiced, where one person's presented something, and something similar to the idea that you just proposed for focus. And then during some of those, you had towards the end a few questions. It was a much simpler version of this list, which just came as a pop-up, and we just answered it in real time, anonymously answered, but you could see the percentage, and so that was kind of interesting. This list seems to be longer, so is it right that the suggestion you have here is more that this is more like something that we can review ourselves after the meeting? I'm also thinking, maybe we could review it and then we could also write something and share in one of the channels. That's kind of what comes up for me with this list. Obviously, it's similar to what we did before, but it's like an expanded version of it.
Thank you. I do have some thoughts, but Alex, I think you're next.
I was just wanted to remind us all that the solutions come with the 3W's reasoning technique. It's a simple 3-step reasoning technique where you ask, what is wrong? Why is it wrong? And what am I going to do about it? It's a simple process used by most of the major master success coaches in the world, I might add. So that's worth remembering, especially when people are so confused and depressed with the calamity that's happening around them in the community and in the world in general. It's depressing, and it does tend to have negative consequences for people without those tools and without those useful suggestions that help focus over.
Okay, thank you. A couple other meta comments, Patricia. I always forget because we don't have a big long essay or onboarding document. But similar to one of the conventions I mentioned where we actually do record everything, there is a Google Doc that I produce after every session, which attempts to capture the entire transcript of the session. Google does an automatic transcription. But it also has a bunch of other materials like, link to the actual raw record, who was involved, what were the topics mentioned, the actual notes that were taken in real time. And it is world writable. I make it globally editable. So anyone can go in and just add their thoughts. Whether you attended or not, you can still go in and aid with some clarification or some translation or delete the entire thing, and then we actually know who did that, because, well, actually, sometimes we don't because the editors are sometimes anonymous. But anyway, in Google Docs, everything is tracked by version. So we can always restore it if anybody actually decides to delete everything. We've never actually seen that yet. On the other hand, we've not opened it up to the entire world. Actually, no, we have. It's just that the entire world doesn't always come in and edit that document. So anyway, I just want to let you know that exists. And then another forum is that we have set up a conversation space in Zulip. It's a free open source conversation platform that we, or at least I personally believe, is way better than Facebook Messenger or Facebook itself. for carrying on threaded conversations. Just so you know, I'm particularly peeved a little bit at Facebook because I've been in Facebook jail more times than I can count due to whatever it is that I have posted that is inappropriate according to Facebook. Okay, I know Barry's been in Facebook jail also, so maybe he and I are the two criminals here according to Facebook. But so for that reason, I sought a different conversation platform. Zulip appears to be quite good. The only thing that right now I have a problem with is they limit each post to 10,000 characters. So Glenn was the first person to find that out with his post from last week.
Yeah, that's not acceptable for me. I mean, we gotta have a space that doesn't have that.
I don't like it. I don't like it, but you know, we can actually look for a better space if you like. I know Slack was originally where people start, except Slack starts charging you money after 10,000 messages. Otherwise, you lose the history. So I don't like the way they do that particular model. At least with Zulip's limitation, you can at least split something up into two separate posts. It's a hack. Ideally, it's not. Because it's open source, however, there's a possibility I could rebuild it and remove that hack. But right now, we use it hosted by Zulip itself, which pays for the memory, it pays for the access, the network transfer bandwidth, and they have decided to give us free access to it because we are trying to work towards global governance models. So they decided to sponsor us. If it would cost money, I would be with Glenn, I'd be off to something else in an instant. But Zulip has decided to sponsor us. So right now, I'm still trying to see if that can work. But yeah, that 10,000 character limit will create some problems. Yeah, Glenn.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think there's definitely something that needs to happen, because in the long run, I don't think that's sustainable to have a character limit. But if you could find a hack to get rid of that, or at least some kind of mechanism where it automatically split the post into several posts, something like that, that already would be much better. And so as it seems to me that we haven't quite figured out yet this question of the written part. So we have the conversations, the written things are a little bit here and there. We have used some messenger threads, and we have a few, and they're kind of more like chat threads. So I think they have a somewhat different purpose, but in my opinion, they're quite useful because it's a good way to just keep an energy flow going. But then there's a need for another place where we can more share longer form material, hopefully material that we've been working on, and then that's even in the form of complete essays. And that's why I think that that character limit is a crucial flaw, because if we're using this the right way, then that's the kind of place where we can just paste in a very long article, and that would be incredibly useful. There is, of course, Google Docs, which has a lot of material, all the transcripts, everything Sam mentioned, but there's also a lot of other material there from the early days of GCC, from other members, and so there's a lot of very interesting material. But I still feel we haven't quite figured out the dynamic of how to use the written spaces. So, personally, I like the idea of using messenger threads a little bit more and using them a little bit more deliberately, but then to combine that with another tool. And that could be Zulip, but then something would have to be done about that character limit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. I have just a quick response. The reason I mentioned Zulip, Patricia, is if you'd like to join us there, it's probably about a dozen or 2 dozen of us there. Please send whatever email you allow to be receiving an invitation, and then I'll send you an invitation to that particular group. Okay, so that's one. Number two, my response to Glenn is, I do think it's a limit, but it's not a crucial, debilitating limit, because it's really intended to be a conversation space. So it's not necessarily meant to be a publication platform, although ideally, one thing could be all of that. But so, Medium could be a publication platform. Your own website could be your own publication platform. Google Docs could be, YouTube could be, and then the conversation, the follow-up, the, precise citations, the commentary could be in Zulip. It's a little bit how I understand it was conceived. I do prefer that the limitation not be there, but I do find it something that will allow us to work around it, I think. I don't think it necessarily just kills it all by itself. Anyway, that's just my feedback, okay? Barry, you're on.
Yeah, I'd like to say a little bit more about the balance between the spoken word and the written word. My own experience and my own preference is, if I want to say something that I want people to recall and think about, I'll spend quite a bit of time doing my homework and thinking about it before I have anything to present. And then I'll write it up. And typically I'll write things up either on a blog, WordPress or Google Blogger, or sometimes medium.com, or if it's longer on Google Sites, all of those are free. And if it's longer than about a 10-minute read, like 10, 20, 30-minute read, the opening paragraph is like an abstract, which is 5, 10 sentences that can be read or spoken in about 3 minutes. And my feeling is, if you have something that's really you want people to retain and be able to go back to, write it up first, write it up carefully, and then present it. On TED Talks, they limit TED Talks to about 18 minutes. And those are very carefully prepared presentations with a lot of rehearsal time. And 18 minutes is about as long as a typical audience can listen to spoken communication that's very well crafted, well presented. I don't know about others, but for me, after about 3 minutes of listening to somebody talk over the top of their head, I'm lost. I cannot absorb the spoken word for more than about 5 minutes without just losing it, unless I'm taking careful notes of what they're saying, almost sentence by sentence. So I would like to see us spend more time preparing material in advance, writing it up in advance, sharing the write-up, and then a summary, an abstract summary that can be recited in about no more than about 3 to 5 minutes. That works for me. These monologues that go on for 20 minutes and are off the top of the head, that's just a loss. That's a loss for me.
Agree with that.
I would agree only in context, though, because sometimes you are deep into a project, but I believe this space has broken a lot of rules about being efficient with your time. So, I agree definitely, if you want to be efficient with your thought, to prepare it and follow up, right? So that's why I'm hoping when Sam is saying these barn raising formats, hopefully each person kind of has their own segment, their own thing. And if it's a thing where 2 or 3 people are working together, then that's another thing. Doesn't mean that's the only reason you're here. There's multiple things. And I tried to impress upon the group early on that we all have several journey maps. So let's not be confused which one we're presenting at what time. And it's also a confusion of what space we're presenting it in. Is it voice? Is it written? Or is it software? Or so, I see the communication in my world as something that happens to smooth the preparation of the bigger ideas, which are captured in some place you do publish, that's made for publishing, like GitHub or Medium or a website. So as far as the 10,000 character limit, you can post 1 of 1, 2 of, 2 of 2, 3 of 3, whatever happens to be. And I find that Zulip, on the topic of Zulip, the problem is that if you try to do anything more than use it as a update communication tool, announcer, billboard, you know, it can't even do what Trello could do. I think Trello is much more powerful than Zulip as far as my purposes, because you could actually put things in context a lot better and edit things. So it's the lack of being able to edit things that bothers me. And anyway, it depends on the context. If you don't need to edit things, then you don't need to edit things. But I find it's a lot more powerful to notice a typo in a messenger thread, copy the text, rewrite it properly, and delete the other one. So you don't have to say, oops, a typo. You know, rewrite it, you know, if you really meant to say it. And if you can't do that in Zulip, it's like very frustrating. And if you want to use it for any kind of a halfway in between a progression, like I made a post where I planned on having it evolve with different people's values. So I don't have to keep writing, you know, post 34 of 34, right? Or copying and pasting the whole text again and then editing the part that I want and say, don't read the one above. It just gets really, really messy if you plan on doing anything that really a Google Doc should be used for, or somewhere that you can control the publishing. So if we're out of context, which is what my complaint is, then like Barry says, it's a waste of time. Doesn't matter if it's spoken or written. It doesn't matter if it's researched or not, because it'll be forgotten. And, you know, so how do we, you know, the two main themes here, all under understanding, are coexistence, right? And how do we have a memory navigate so that, you know, we're not just coexisting on faith, but actually look at this. This is what my mentor told me. And I believe it to be very true. I think that this is true. And someone says, well, that's very nice, but that actually, have you considered this other point? And if you're the type of person that wants to argue, then, you know, so that's where I think the essence is here. How do we have these fair conversations? And the tools are secondary. And and we've broken all the rules already by wasting more time than anybody has a right to, but I don't think it's a waste. If you look at it the right way, it's just showing how difficult the challenge is of bringing forward ideas. And so Barry does have the key, which is the scientific method, which is research and write and get feedback. And let's drop the word criticism and pick up the word feedback. Sounds good to me. Thank you.
So I believe Glenn had his finger up, then me, and then Alex.
Yeah, just briefly, I also think that editing is absolutely crucial for a tool that we're going to use. If you can't edit, I mean, it's a no-go for me. I use it all the time.
Okay, are you done? Can I respond? Okay, let me say that I actually disagree with both of you on this, and I'll disagree gently but firmly, okay? I think that editing is dangerous. If you want to revise your thought, send another thought, okay? But the fact is, if something was uttered, it can be linked. And if I link to it and make a commentary on what was linked, then that commentary is invalidated when you go back and edit. So then what I said no longer potentially applies, or it could just look ludicrous. So it's a very Engelbartian notion. And by the way, in software notion, there's also the idea of data immutability, which really is at the root of this, is that things that happen don't change. You can always create new things, but things that happened already happened. So you can't go back and rewrite history. And that's a fundamental nature of what is referenceable, what is citable. And so I actually do firmly disagree with that. That was one of the key Doug Engelbart ideas, which is a knowledge repository can always be added to, can always be augmented, but never changed. And I firmly embrace that idea. So that's what I would, I would respond to. In that way, I think the Zulip guidance is you have 10 minutes to edit your post for things like spelling errors, nuances, whatever. But after 10 minutes, it becomes uneditable. And I actually like that feature. I think that's a great feature of a conversation space. Over. Alex, you're on.
I realized the value of memory and the value of honesty when I was getting sober, because there were things you would say to the people in the group meeting, in a group setting, that if it was dishonest or a lie, it would eventually come to the surface and be exposed. And so having a lot short-term memory loss meant I had to be more honest than I usually was. Because you say things, if you're bullshitting, it'll come out later.
Can you name one incident that's happened here?
No, not offhand. But the thing is, the social network problem, interacting, especially when you're in small groups like this and face-to-face, intimate conversations, you can have a degree of lockdown, if you like, or isolation, like in a silo. And so the idea that I had with my Links Plus website was to create an avenue for more permanent agreement, more solid agreement, and links to other people's pages that you have a value with, because that grows this value conversation. And that's where the bread and butter is of internet networking, I believe. In the future, will develop like that, away from the big platforms into more smaller networks and localization. But if they're linked, there can be a global network, like the images I showed before and the images I collected on my websites. They all point to this diversification and decentralization of power. And that gives democracy a better chance of improving too, because democracy is in a shambles at the moment, the way it's going.
Yeah.
Over.
Thank you, Alex. I don't believe there's any hand up, so let me make another comment. Patricia, as I mentioned, one of our formats is a deep dive. You did come with a very passionate statement about what keeps you up at night, what you think about just before you go to sleep, just when you wake up. So if you'd like to take one of these upcoming Saturdays and do a presentation on what it is that calls you, compels you, get your blood running, your call to action, maybe an even call for a collaboration, you're invited to put together a little summary of it, post it, and then we'll schedule it for one of these upcoming Saturdays. Barry has a number of topics on the roadmap. Glenn at least has one or two. I've got a few. Kayla actually has one on culture and collaboration that is coming up soon as well. So anyway, we have a handful of things that are all up, but all of us have gone before. So I believe all of us would be very interested in what you would bring once you're ready to do so. Okay.
Thank you. I find the what you have suggested very, very interesting. I have lots of themes that I like to that I would enjoy to talk about, so that I can easily make some suggestions as well, and then hopefully make it fit maybe with similar themes in the same session, maybe. Why not? Just wanted to say about what was discussed previously. I think it's all very interesting. I'm just sharing my opinion since I was here. So and so also I'm not familiar with the sessions, and not that familiar. What I thought about the List Right Way was that it was a little bit long. So if it's something to do recurrently after each session, it might put some people off. It might be a little bit like bureaucratic, on top of. So actually do the opposite of what it's supposed to do. So, but I think as well, it depends on you know, the what is intended to achieve with it as well. Like obviously it's problem solving, which, you know, it's very relevant, but yeah, the expectation of how much it could contribute as well. So it's all relevant, and it's difficult to balance. But yeah, I regarding the types as well of the tools that we are using for communication, and about you were talking about if you know, the edition kind of thing as well. So what I understood is that I think it's different to make a record of something meant as a conversation, to work as a conversation, than it is to make a record of things to use as plan and collaboration and working together to build things, you know, as kind of I think it's two different approaches, and it sounded like some of you here have more of so the expectation of that being more of the conversation, you know, backlog, basically massive, and to foment that conversation, and some other would more hoping, I think, to use the content for actually doing things and organizing, and that's two different things. So, you know, if you want, you have to define what you want to achieve with that, so that you can use the best tool for it, basically. Because if you want to keep it as conversation space, then the edition, the possibility, well, of not editing, you know, and being everything connect, then makes more sense. But if you want to use it as something to build over and to perfect, and, you know, then editing makes more sense, you know. So yeah, that was just my 2 cents about what was said as well.
Okay, thank you. Glenn, you've got your finger up.
Yeah, this is a kind of a big, interesting theme, because there's also this idea that we have a dynamic conversation space, and we use it in a way where we build something in real time. And as I thought here, I think that as long as you have the ability to edit for 10 minutes afterwards, I think that's very helpful for me, because most of my edits are just typos. It's interesting. I've noticed how I write when I'm in a conversation. It's like somebody says something, I begin to write a response. I try to be relatively thorough, and then I go back and I read it from the top, and then I change something, and I read down, and I change it, and I change it, and I change it, and I change it. And when I'm at maybe the 20th time, it's like, I can't take it anymore. And I just push send. And then I notice there's always a couple of typos. Then I edit those, and then, okay, let's let it go, right? So that's an interesting thing that I've noticed, just for myself. But I definitely have an intuition that I want to use the dynamic conversation, written conversation space as a tool for creating content. I mean, most of the content that I write actually starts like that. It starts in some kind of chat. Somebody asks a question, I think about it, I write a response. It's usually relatively long, and it's often when I'm sitting on a bus or something like that, and with the iPad. So it's actually really important that it's just technically simple to use. But this is it's a very interesting conversation, because I've always had this vision for a long time of doing so much more with the written space, in terms of being able to ask questions, come with responses, then copy the response that someone else has done and then offer possible suggestions for reformulations. And this is an idea I've had for 10 years, and I've hardly ever experienced anyone doing it. There's only one member who actually did this in GCC, and he was kicked out. And he was called Esteban, and that's many years ago. But yeah, it was a very unfortunate thing. But maybe he didn't do it very well, but he was one of the very few people who regularly practiced this of just copying what somebody else had written and then offering alternative formulations. And I think that's a really interesting way to work. It's like I haven't really practiced it at scale, but I've had this strong intuition for a long time that kind of way of working could be very valuable as a supplement to these kind of spoken conversations. And then you need to use copying, and it needs to be simple to use. That's very important. Yeah, I'm finished.
Thanks, Glenn. I do have a response that I'll send you after today's session on that last theme. Well, one of the things I'd like to get back to is perhaps an analogy, okay? If I walked into my girlfriend's father's garage one time. He's a woodworker. He builds boats. He's a carpenter. He's also a plumber, okay? The entire garage, all 3 walls of the garage were filled floor to ceiling with tools. He had asps, saws, clamps, files, sandpaper, everything. So the analogy I'd like to draw is masters master multiple tools. If all you've got is a hammer, I don't need to complete that quote, okay? So I think masters are impartial to the tools. They find a good tool for a purpose, they use it, they manage to make multiple tools work together so that the end product is as fine as they can produce. And whether it's a boat in the water, or whether it's a chimney on a roof, or whether it's a desk, or whether it's a chair, doesn't really matter, right? It's for the purpose, you do what needs to be done. So if everybody wants to use Facebook as both a publishing platform, a conversation platform, a video repository, a love-hate relationship, place to date, it tries to make everything. That's what Facebook wants you to think, because they make money off of that. But they're not optimizing their capabilities for any of those things for you. It's other things, typically open source things, built out of love, that are really dedicated for certain purposes, like conversation, like dating apps, okay? You really figure out what you're really trying to do and use the right tool for the job. So I'm not trying to be very partial to anything. I just like to understand what affords, good particular, Doug uses the word affordances, and then take advantage of that. So that's what I would like to inject into this conversation is let's not be too emotional about any 1 or 2 given platforms. I'm just trying to find a good set. I think, Colin mentioned Trello. I love Trello. I really do think that if we had a broader acceptance of Trello, we could really have a much more effective group memory. I think Google Docs, very good repository. I think Zulip is actually a fairly good conversation space that I'd still like to see more adoption on, at least until we find something better. Okay, so anyway, that's my response to tools and how we associate or interact with them and what kind of emotional baggage we have with them. Over. Thanks, Alex. I will find that link for Trello and I will post it again.
There's quite a lot of material in Trello that we put in before. So
Yeah,
we can use many platforms. Yeah.
I think I was next. I hope I don't take very long, if you don't mind. Is that correct, Sam? Did you say Colin then Sam?
Sorry,
I don't
I
wanna-
went on mute. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Sam. I just don't want to step on the flow.
Sorry, I think I
Um,
went out of turn then. I apologize. Then.
No. You were passionate and it was in the right place. And actually, you took the words out of my mouth with affordance right at the end, because that is what it's about. And there's also an underlying purpose of why editing and copying can be bad, which is for certain it can ruin the trail of history. So the affordance is, can the tool track the history? When I'm in Facebook and I edit, it shows the mistakes I made, but I can go back 2 days later and put a comma in and change the whole meaning of what that meant in Flow, which is what I intended. So if somebody cares to go back, they can look and see, oh, he added that comma. That made a big difference. And I feel that you may not be considering that in a roundabout way, you're defeating your purpose with the 10-minute edit on Zulip, because the tool doesn't afford tracking history. You've decided, well, if it doesn't track history, there will be no history other than copy and paste again. Or like, I could see someone like Barry has a whole set of information that he can choose from depending on topic and context. So, he's probably copy and pasting most of his stuff anyway. Does it all link back to his? So we don't have the Engelbartian dream right now. So I really agree. Sorry, the new girl, what's her name? Patricia. I agree with Patricia's analysis of the fact that depending on the creative space that you're in, you may need to edit or not. And I said long ago as Zulip, if Sam's going to put the hammer down and say, I'm not lifting the 10-minute edit, or if that's even possible, I think it is possible to lift that rule. So how do we have a conversation if we lifted that rule in certain types of situations, it's better? Or do we just have a carte blanche rule? So there's a whole discussion of governance of a tool that has affordances that we haven't turned on, that some people feel are working against them, where other people feel that those affordances are making things better because it's the best way to track the history. So if we're really after the history, why don't we use a better tool that tracks the history? I don't know, but we definitely need to have a conversation about what it is we're trying to do. And Barry can defeat us all by just copying and pasting his article to wherever it needs to be, because it's all ready. He's been thinking about it, and he knows where to go to put new information when he finds something new to add to it. So he can go and, I don't know, then he has a copy problem of all the stuff that he pasted. So until we solve the Engelbartian problem, we're going to have this, how do we highlight what's current and what's now? And that's kind of where I'm trying to focus my efforts in the this tool. I call it the Vidory, VIDORY, like a place, like a laboratory, where you can go and interact with this trail of information in a way that it's still alive and in the now, and can be used for clarifying and possibly editing in a way that video hasn't been able to be edited before, because it's sort of like old school. If you remember those cassette tapes, you tape it, and nowadays we have MP3, so we should be treating, and people have clips and things, but I would really like to move in that direction and look at the affordances, what we're actually trying to do to hone our messages, and are we cutting and pasting work that we've done already everywhere's anyway? So somebody who's trying to hone out a little message gets shut down while somebody's been doing it for 20 years is ready. He can just cut and paste it wherever he wants. Like, what are we trying to achieve? I guess the idea is, if you're going to use Zulip and you want to have a big idea, make it somewhere else and copy and paste it to Zulip and publish it on your website. And, it really comes down to the message, not the tool. That's the whole point, and the intention. And I would like to second the nomination for Trello. It's a really clean, handy dandy honey-do list. if you want to get something done and keep context around things. It seems to, another one's Asana, another one's Jira. Project management is what we're talking about. So there's 3 sets of tools. You got the chat tool, like the Slack, the Discord, and the messengers. You got the project management stuff where the guy who's not writing the code, make sure everybody's checking things done. And then the guy who's writing the code, he's using a repository that affords the history. So any change he makes can be rolled back, but he can still create and move forward without creating a whole new website every time he wants to make a change. So yeah, what are we trying to do? Thank you. I'm sorry if I took too long.
Okay. If nobody else is going, I'm going to respond to one of Patricia's comments, which is, and I heard you, I was just waiting for my turn, that the list that I read off and that I shared is too long. Absolutely. Okay. That's what I was looking for feedback on. What are the essentials? Okay. So you notice that the 4 practices I mentioned that were part of the community of impact right at the beginning, that was after 7 months of conversation. We distilled a whole bunch of ideas down to 4 practices. Okay. So it takes a while, and it takes thinking, and it takes prioritization, and it takes real modeling to understand what the essence is. This list was just an attempt to try and get towards that that general idea. But I appreciate the feedback, and I will definitely incorporate that into the next draft of that list. If anybody else is willing to go, I'll shut up. But the other thing I'd like to bring up, in addition to Colin bringing up Asana and Jira, is GitHub. GitHub, it turns out, in the software world, is the ultimate collaboration platform. Pretty much the entire open source world operates on Git, and most of that is on GitHub. And one very key factor in GitHub is nothing is changed. Nothing is deleted. Everything is accreted. Everything is added to. Everything is versioned, but nothing disappears. It's a key element, and software people have understood this now for quite a long time. And it's a key, very crucial component of collaboration. Just wanted to point that out. Over.
Times 10.
Could we use GitHub from a mobile device?
Yes, there is an app. By the way,
That
I've
sounds
already created
interesting.
a GCC space in GitHub where I'm preparing a bunch of stuff, but I've not yet started to publicize it yet, by the way.
Maybe that could be worth trying.
Yeah. Alex.
I'm just thinking that those of us who have the time available and want to collaborate with the links plus entry on their webpage can do so. That's a great idea to help develop the virtual collaboration, the virtual cloud community that is impenetrable by the big platforms, because it's, you know, it belongs to the people. Decentralized power. Over.
Okay. Thanks. Glenn, you're on.
Yeah, I think we've said some really interesting things about platforms, and you know, I like Trello a lot. I you know, we can use Zulip. We can use several platforms. GitHub is very interesting. Could be worth trying. It does seem to me, in any case, though, that the essential thing here is the process itself. So if the process is good, then one can use many different platforms or one platform, and it's going to yield good results. If we are masters, I like that analogy, then we'll figure out our way around it. It is, though, quite important if we want to collaborate and building something written that's based on the ideas that we'll explore here, that at least we have one place that all of us can use. There's nothing wrong in putting material in several places, because I think that the kind of material that we're sharing here is pretty public anyway, right? So, and that's a big strength, in my opinion, to you know, work in public And so, you know, when I share something, you know, somebody else can copy it. I guess it would be clone it in GitHub. It's called, and then they can change it. I think that's a really, you know, key thing.
Yes.
But it's the process itself is what is the generator function for all the material that's being put out. And in the process itself, then it's this question of showing up with the right mindset and asking good questions and sort of being willing to explore some of these themes. That seems essential. Yeah, that was what I want to say.
Thank you. Anybody else before I go?
I mean, no, I wasn't supposed to go. I just wanted to add something related to what I said, but
Go ahead, then I'll go.
Okay. Yes, I think that in the process idea, which is fulcral, I believe so, as well as Glenn was saying, is I think a lot of places where things fail is when people have different expectations of what they are there for, you know. So even if we have something like, for example, these sessions being about collaboration, understanding, creating maybe models of understanding and cohesion, each person will have an expectation on how to do that and how, and exactly what the success means for them, you know, and sometimes in things as simple as that, things fall apart because people have just completely different notions of what is success and what is worthwhile and what isn't for them, you know. So so I think it's one of the main things to define as within the process, you know, is everybody expecting the same, and maybe group people that are wanting the same types of achievement or expecting the same type, and those can work together, because if we are working for a different objective, we will never be able to collaborate really, because there's so many objectives and things we can collaborate for, but if it's not the same thing, then it's not collaboration, you know. It's and things get apart, fall apart. That's it.
Is it my turn? Okay. So in response, I'll do last in, first out. In response to your last statement, as well as Glenn's, one of the big themes that we have hit in the last couple of years is this notion that expectations set up potential disappointments unless these agreements are clear, okay? It's a big theme. We've spent much time on this one. So I just want to reference that because, you know, if you want to go deep, yes, we can go deep on that one. The other one was an earlier notion about where you put things, okay? The cool thing about the internet, and by the way, I consider that really the emergence of Mozilla way back like around 91, okay? Because up until then, it was all government only, it was all Milnet, it was all ARPANET, you know, there wasn't really commercial presence until about 91, and a little browser called Mozilla. By the way, when it was first downloaded on my Sun Solaris machine, it came with the list of all the websites in the world. This was like 20 or 22 at the time, okay? And that was it. Anyway, it's definitely grown since then. Anyway, that the whole idea is if there are links, and because we have the internet, we have links, okay? So anything you write can link to anything anywhere else. It doesn't have to be on any single specific platform. A link doesn't care where it's pointing to, okay? Some people say it shouldn't care, it should care more, but actually it doesn't right now, okay? It just says go there, okay? And it doesn't care if even there exists. It just says go there. So the whole idea that we have links that cross platforms says you're free to put anything you want anywhere, okay, as long as it's linkable. So it gets me back to Glenn's point about the fact that it's not so much the platform, it's about the process. And for me, the process is very simple at the high level. It's, do you care? Start by caring, okay? And if you care, then think and create, link to something, comment, or create your own artifact, okay? And co-create that. And then write it up or model it or present it or create a video or audio blog it or whatever, and then offer it up for sharing. It's a simple process, okay? Start by caring. If you care enough, you'll take the time to do the rest of it. And if you care enough, you'll actually take something, you'll give your thoughts on it, you'll anneal it with your own values, you'll actually co-create something better, and then offer it so somebody else can do exactly the same thing. That to me is a very simple process. It doesn't matter where you put things. Now, when you try and optimize other things, that's when you care about the platform. But that fundamental process, you can do anywhere. You can do it in email if you want. I'm not saying that's a great platform, but you could, if you're a relative Luddite, still do it in email today. So anyway, that's what I would just like to say, is that links enable ubiquitous co-creation. Expectations, if not done carefully, will potentially lead to disappointment. And that the process is just start by caring and start by investing yourself and sharing it over for now.
Sam, I love to add one little thing I think is really essential. In addition to that, there has to be a feedback mechanism. When I put something out, I need to know if people have received it and get something out, and I think that's kind of why we have these meetings in some sense, because and that's also part of the idea of the deep dives or whatever we call them. But it's like, so you can put something out, and if it's then received and you get some feedback, then the magic really can happen.
I love that point. Very good. Thanks, Glenn. Alex, you're on.
I'm thinking about the feedback loop. If you want to stay in the loop, then those weekly Zoom sessions are like critical, because they're talking about the same thing that you're trying to focus on, provided you in the right room. So a collaboration that's designed to bring together a group of people who care about the issues, the important things that are endangering cohesion in society and liable to disrupt global economic systems and world trade. That's important to think about, because it's the trade and the politics that create jobs and give people livelihoods and give them meaning in their lives, even something to do. But it needs to be there. It needs to be focused in the right direction, not in the greed bucket where the corporations are just raping and pillaging the planet to make as much as they can for their shareholders. That's like a machine that's working in the background to destroy the planet. And it's being controlled by the politicians who are giving them the rope. They're giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Unfortunately, we're all in the same boat, so we hang too. So this is why it's important, I think. This is why we need to stay in the loop and listen to what others are doing, because for the rest of the week, when you're not in the Zoom session, you're doing other stuff, and that helps you focus on that. At least you've got a background, a support group of people who are also focused on work that's pointing in the same direction. This is giving us a level up effect. Leveling up means moving forward, moving on, and not stagnating, getting out of our silos. Over.
Colin, you haven't spoken yet, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. You speak of the community of impact, I think is, where you find yourself when you follow the caring route. Community of impact of some sort. And, you know, Alex is pointing at the other as the corporations. And surely there's lots of psychopaths running all kinds of greedy schemes. There's no doubt, as there always has been and always will be, probably. Unfortunately, Glenn, not everyone can behave, apparently. But are we accountable? Like when, I remember a story a guy told me just quickly, you know, you see people protesting Occupy Wall Street movement, and then they go buy Tim Hortons coffee, right? And, you know, to me, that sounded like a really, you know, oh, that's, you know, everybody buys coffee because, you know, you got to buy coffee. But yeah, the Wall Street's horrible. It's like, we are part of the problem, and how much do we realize that? Now, the question is, how much influence do we have? And what kind of influence should we have? Should we revolt? I don't think so, you know, like, but is it, do we intellectually revolt? It seems like, yes, we have to go against bad ideas. So how do we figure out what are the bad ideas? And can we actually feel it's our duty, or are we accountable for, you know, being part of the problem? Are we actually, you know, putting it all in politicians' hands? Oh, they can't solve it because they're so corrupt. Well, you know what? They're dealing with wicked problems, just like we are thinking we are anyway. So it's extremely difficult. So to have a navigation tool of conversation, as cold-hearted as that seems to be the blockchain of conversation. I don't know. Anyway, I'll just stop there. But yeah, are we accountable, and how do we know? And are we just spreading good ideas, bad ideas, pointing at the other? What do you think, Barry? I haven't heard Barry for a while.
And multiple people want to hear from Josh as well.
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear from Josh. Josh has been on for quite a while. He's got his camera on. He hasn't said anything. I love listening to Josh. He always has something interesting to say.
Yeah, sorry, Josh, I didn't see you there. You know, I would have passed it to you. Join the clubhouse, Josh.
I'm just listening today, but that's really nice of you to say that, Barry. I was coming to listen to you as well. So I wanted to know what Barry has to say, but it's lovely to listen to Glenn and, you know, hear about his, Esteban. That's right. I forgot his name. I was waiting to hear about, you know, is Esteban actually kicked out, or is he even a part of the thing that is just a collaboration? You know, we never really finished whether he was kicked out or if there was anything to be kicked out of, if we're in a club.
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
brought
right.
up everything last week was, you know, I would like to make a non-dominium club or a trust and an organization where we all own the rights to all the assets, all the knowledge, and we share it openly and freely with everybody. But also, if it's going to be rebroadcast in any format on a professional platform, that if there are any monetary gains, that gets moved towards future generations to help those people understand communication, collaboration, communities of impact. So I'm just here to help other people and listen. That's pretty much it. And this week I've just been studying artificial intelligence and trying to see how we can change what we talked about the other week from saying the word artificial to augmented and assisted. And the more I'm listening to this conversation, what keeps coming up for me is how can we assist each other to be more intelligent and use tools that are assisting the intelligence. And I just came to say hi also, just because I like you guys. So that's it. So thank you that's my thoughts. Thank you.
I can give you some information about Esteban because he shared with me quite a few years ago what his rather idiosyncratic practice is. He gave it a name. He told me the name of his practice. He calls it phantom rendition. And what that is if, for example, I will write a think piece that's, say, a few paragraphs long, and it's text. He will take the text and essentially make a word cloud out of the text, change a few of the words to similar but different words, and then reassemble them into kind of a parody or a different kind of presentation of the same material, and he calls it a phantom rendition. It's not exactly a satire or a parody. It's sort of a carefully munged version of it. And he does that on purpose. He can also write in completely ordinary prose paragraphs where everything is a complete sentence and everything makes sense. He does that rarely, but he can do it. He can switch between these two modes instantly, between this phantom rendition mode, which is his most common way of replying, to just, very serious, just his real self. And I have examples, by the way, that I've saved from past episodes going back several years, if you ever wanted to look at examples.
And I'll share one thing to that too. He also would continuously return to one central theme, which was the idea of doing the right thing now in the right way. So it was this idea of a situational perspective rather than a problem perspective. So he's very concerned about us being lost in abstractions and ideologies, which I'm also very concerned about. I think it's a very serious issue. So that I think that was also related to this phantom rendition, that it was a tool to sort of mix up the language. The purpose, as I saw it, was to sort of break free from language barriers, and many people misunderstood it, unfortunately, but I thought it was a very interesting practice. Yeah.
He often said that doing the better thing is the better thing to do. And I often used to mention to him that it's a statement of the obvious.
Tautology.
Yeah, tautology. Yeah, that's right.
It's an obvious. It goes without saying that if you're improving something, you're making it better, and that's the right thing to do. It's as if what would you be saying if you said the opposite? Better to do the wrong thing, better to do something bad. So I think he's got an issue with his own moral judgment or something. I don't know. Over.
Josh, Josh, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you when you said Esteban no longer with our group, but is that really the case, or is he just temporarily not active?
No, he was actually kicked out by someone.
But is he allowed to come back in, or is he?
Well,
that has been an open question for 3 years.
Yeah,
I was the first.
That's why I'm asking it.
I was the very first to say, hey, this was done unilaterally and probably unjustly, but there hasn't seemed to be an emerging agreement, and I've been sort of waiting to see if that would actually emerge.
And that member isn't active here any longer either.
Yeah, the one that actually kicked Esteban out.
Yeah, so she just did it all by herself. And
no. Esteban was offering his alternate opinion to me over and over again, and I just got frustrated with him. Lucy got tired of me telling him to stop trolling me. Because, if you want Esteban's help, you got it. And if you don't want it, you got it. So, yeah, so it's nice. And he made it really well in the meta theory group, and I really, initially took to him quite well because of his strict guidelines towards wanting better and looking at everything from how to best look at things. So, he really had that. But he also had and so Lucy thought that she would be a good group member for the we and got rid of the he. And then we went into a series of not knowing how to deal with conflict resolution again for the 8th time. That was actually the 3rd time probably. And actually Gertrude and a bunch of them got together and had some private meetings with him. And there's videos of interviewing Esteban on whether he can fit in and work with the group or what it is he's trying to actually say or I don't know. I can't even remember. It's just a whole bunch of amateurs trying to play Hammurabi.
Well, I remember it Gertrude had a meeting with Esteban after this, and they just spoke for about an hour, and I heard the whole thing, and it's just a perfectly decent conversation.
Well, it was
but
a bit of
then-
an interview. It was an interview. It was set up for conflict resolution specifically.
Yeah,
It was. It wasn't just a chat.
that's right. It was set up. Yeah. And then there was another instance where there was a meeting on Friday where we spoke for quite a while, and we decided to try to resolve it on Sunday. And then we came on Sunday, but then Doug didn't even know about this, and the whole thing went off the rails right from the beginning. And Lucy didn't know about it. So that was just kind of a miscommunication that happened there. So the whole thing was pretty messy, and it's a long time ago, but it's also true, obviously, that the way he pursued this method, was, certainly uncommon, not normal way of communicating, which some people reacted to. So
He had one useful talent or skill, which I was able to take advantage of maybe only 2 or 3 times. He was a very good sketch artist and could make diagrams. And a couple of times when I needed a diagram to illustrate something, and I'm terrible at making sketches, he made a couple sketches for me that I still use to this day. So, whenever I needed a sketch or a diagram, he was the go-to guy. But not if you wanted him to give a verbal presentation. He would just take a word cloud and rearrange it and present the words in some funky order that was sort of amusing at first, but after a while it gets old.
it's almost a kind of comedy in the
So
way that it's.
I'm trying to associate this back to the original theme, which is a focus. I think the focus has shifted.
Yeah, the occult overtones from Esteban has moved us away from the focus. Over.
Well, what led us into it was this, we talked about other versions of writing. That was how we got into talking about Esteban. Because he practiced one version of that. And I think that's connected to our discussion about group memory and the relation between the spoken and written word.
He would do what I call word salads. Word salad is where you say a lot of words, but it's like a mixed up salad. It doesn't actually have complete sentences that have any semantic meaning, but all the words are there. And so this phenomenon of word salads, this spitballing off the top of your head, but he did more than that. He rearranged them in a special way that wasn't just a word salad, but it sounds like a word salad.
That reminds me of the how-to dealing with incident reports. When group interactions encounter an incident that diverts us from our focus, it's worthwhile having a document to report that. It's an incident report. Albert.
Seeing as it's now 1:45, I thought I would take this opportunity to revisit my original list of questions that I came here with. It is long. I heard that definitely, but I just wanted to at least read through them quickly again to see if they apply to this session. Okay. And then offer the time remaining to any checkout if anybody really wants to do checkout. Oh, by the way, Patricia, we don't formally do check-ins or checkouts, but if anyone feels like doing so, they're more than welcome to. But I don't actually go around the room saying, Stacy, how are you today? Tees, how are you today? We don't do that anymore, but people will say, hey, here's how I'm doing today, or here's how I'd like to share. And that's the way we do it. So both in the check-in as well as in the checkout session, okay? So here's the questions I came with. Did we focus today? Did we stray inappropriately? Or did we stray appropriately? Where was our context? Was moderation effective? How could it have been better? Did I or we learn anything? Did we make sense? Was my vision augmented? Was our collective vision augmented? Was movement achieved towards coexistence? Was my memory augmented? Was our collective memory augmented? And did we co-create? Were agreements proposed or adopted? Did I agree to take specific action? And if so, what and by when? Were triggers handled appropriately? As far as I can tell, I don't think anybody was particularly triggered today. Was anyone overly verbose? Okay. Was anyone not heard? They should have been heard. And did I or did we have fun? Long list. From that, hopefully we'll have some conversation and cull it down to a more succinct list. But that's what I came here with. With that, I'll either take that as my checkout, or I might actually optionally close out that at the top of the hour again. But I'll leave it to the rest of you now for the next 13 minutes.
Josh has his hand up. We haven't heard from Stacy either.
Did Stacy have her hand up? I can't see.
Vice had his hand up earlier, but I think
No.
you were first, maybe, Josh.
Well, I'm just gonna
Okay.
check. I'm just gonna check out Josh real quick. I'm in the back
Yes,
getting ready to
please.
leave, but I've been listening. Take care, and I'll see you all next week.
See you, Stace.
Okay, Stacy, take care.
I think it's Josh and then Alex.
Yeah, my
And
question was
Vice.
actually, I was just going to ask you, Sam, did you have fun today? That was it.
I have fun every one of these sessions. I think every one of these
Nice.
sessions is fodder for a collaborology, And thanks for
Did you
asking.
learn anything?
I learned that my initial list of questions was too long. I got to do something about that. So I'm going to take some action on that. I also learned that, that Colin and Glenn have a different notion of editing and how it supports conversation spaces. So I'll think about that, but I've had this thought of mine, going back to 1992. So it's been 29 years that I've been fairly solid in the don't change things, don't delete things camp. So I'll have to think more carefully, but I have a lot to say on that topic. Over.
I saw an image
Oh,
on
Josh, are you done?
who?
Okay. All right, Alex.
Yes, I saw a image on Colin's map of the three of you, Sam and Gertrude, and I think it was the other guy, the Dutch guy. No,
Harry.
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 Oh.
So that was the same image I used on my Links Plus page where I mentioned the COI, because that's a great picture. Over.
That was the first GCC real world meeting, wasn't it?
Alex, I'm still expecting royalties from that picture. I'm just kidding.
Patricia wants to say something, I think.
Me, yeah. I just wanted to say about the editing. I think it's very interesting, and I can see how Sam, has a lot of a strong idea about it. So what I see is the main problem of of editing. Is and keeping all the versions is redundancy. It's so, but if it's in a tool that minimizes the redundancy, so we have access to the latest edit, and then we can kind of follow through the whatever history there is behind, then that minimizes the redundancy, basically. So it's all about, again, the tool, and making the best use of tools. There's as well something that came across about the accountability that I found very interesting as a theme. And then it's something I think that could be, most likely you have discussed as well, but could be a problem in a space like this. Would be, so okay, this is about creating new understanding, and so co-creating, but once this new understanding is created, besides having the log of it, okay, this session happened, a new understanding what was created. Is there any follow-up on is actually how relevant is that information, where it sits between all the rest of the information, and if there needs to be, because new understanding was created, if there's the need to create a new model of understanding, basically, or if it's that important that such thing could be done, and how to collaborate towards that, basically. And so that's something that I thought, would be interesting to think about. And finally, about the list that was given, that might be too long. I think if we are here in a space of collaboration, then why not spend some time thinking, which question, is, or which question seems more relevant or less relevant, or if somehow could be merged into another question. And as well, again, what is the tool of this question? Like how is it going to be compiled? Is it like SurveyMonkey kind of thing? Is it because I thought about this, because if I look at, did we stray inappropriately? Did we stray appropriately? I would see very much those three kind of the same. It's all about the focus, if it happened and if it was reasonable or not. So it could be, did we focus? Yes, no, and if there was no, then only reply to the other questions, because if it's a yes, then the other questions are redundant. Then was moderation effective? So, for example, how could it have been better? Maybe this could be done at the end for everything, like if there's anything that could have been better, and if somebody has a suggestion for it, then that would be the right place to write, independently of which question it relates to. So that would be a way as well to maybe cut out a few questions. I didn't have a look, but that's like had just a quick look at the beginning. But we could do that now, and I don't know if it's what is wanted or not.
What I'm curious about is not so much the immediate feedback, but I'm curious about the lingering, thoughtful feedback. And that's why I mentioned the Zulip conversation space, is that that's a good place to share those kind of ideas, not necessarily just an immediate reaction of 5 or 10 words, but like, for example, Glenn wrote up a very thoughtful 10,000 plus character post, which was quite rich and stimulated much conversation. So if we go away and think about it and write up, 100 words, 500 words, whatever it is, that's fodder for conversation later on. And that's then feedback I can learn from, and then we can improve what we do. So I think thoughtful feedback, to me, is more useful than immediate shallow feedback. Not saying immediate always has to be shallow, but typically the longer one thinks about it, the more connected, the more relevant, the deeper it typically is. That's a generalization.
That's very interesting, because I was seeing those questions as generation of data, as how to analyze then data and to make understanding. Once you gather the data, I wasn't thinking of this question as fodder for conversation. So you see straight away there was a completely different understanding of the purpose of the questions, you know, the expectation.
I think it serves both of those purposes.
Yeah, it's completely possible, you know, but again, it wasn't clear. So, you know, it's interesting.
Well, just a particular thing about me. I live in a world where data is code, is data is code, is data is code. And yes, I know that that's meaningless to most of you. I'd be happy to explain at some point.
I kind of understand that. Just the other day, I had a similar conversation. It was not quite about this, but somebody was telling me about how something was system and some other type of was, you know, the approach of the system, and how another type of communication was not, you know, systemic approach. And I was like, I can't, doesn't compute, because I see everything as a system, like even love and relationships and, you know, emotional stuff, it's system as well. So I you know, what you were saying was not, because I wouldn't be able to do that comparison, you know, whilst most people would see just some things into the systemic kind of capacity, yeah, and some other things not. So I kind of understand what you're saying.
Yeah, there's two types of people in the world. Those that think there are two types of people in the world, and then the other kind.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'll do a little checkout here. As usual, yeah, I'm always having fun in these meetings as well, and it's always fodder for understanding and for further thought. I think it was a really interesting question you asked there, Patricia, about what comes out of this understanding. And then you mentioned earlier, you know, how different people have different expectations and different purposes. And that does seem to be a characteristic feature of these open conversation spaces. Then there is the notion, of course, of having a multi-purpose conversation space. I feel this is a typical example of that. It's like a generative open space where a lot of different things happen, and different people come into it, and they take out different things from it. They add something in, they take something out, and then there is some kind of an understanding which is formed, and some kind of development of understanding, some kind of movement of energy, if you will, which becomes food for further reflections. And the degree to which each of us gets something valuable out of it seems to depend a lot on the attitude with which we engage. So if I'm looking for something to get out of it, I'll typically find quite a lot. It's just that if we look at the space as a whole, there is a kind of a fundamental ambiguity about sort of what is it that's really happening in these spaces. So that's just worth, you know, being aware of. And it might be just a really fundamental property of these spaces that it, you know, that it must be a little ambiguous. There's many parallel purposes. There's many parallel understandings that develop. Like just now, Colin's sitting in the background, he's making a map, and he's, you know, being inspired by things he's hearing here, and there's an artifact that's being created out of that. And as you can see, his map is really big, and it's a result of things he's been working on for, you know, the whole period. So he's doing those kind of things in the background. I'm having many of my own ideas that get stimulated by this. Others have their understandings. So it's like maybe the action that comes out of the understanding, it's not so easy to pinpoint it exactly. It's kind of fundamentally ambiguous or undefinable. You can't kind of make an easy formula for it, I guess. But personally, I'm trusting that if the conversation space itself is good, in the sense that there's a dynamic where people share interesting things, and there's an attention where we're listening and we're receiving and we're showing up with a fairly open mind, then there's something that just evolves by itself. And maybe I'm not supposed to understand it. Maybe I'm not supposed to, you know, be able to just put it into a formula. I can create some artifacts along the way, which can take some ideas together while at the same time stimulating the further exploration. And yet those artifacts are kind of just steps along the way as well, and they're not necessarily all that fundamental. It's kind of like each meeting is it's like an encounter between many minds that sort of throw into this pool of ideas, and these ideas bounce off each other, and then I go back and I reflect, wondering what that could mean, etc. And there's just this movement that's happening in the mind, and it's developing across several years. And who knows what comes out of it. But if the process is good, then my best guess is that something good does come out of it. And it's definitely always, you know, a lot of material that one can work with. So in that sense, you can also just view it as an energy energy current. Just in different meetings with different people, different topics being discussed in different channels. So yeah, so this idea of multi-purpose kind of fits a little with that. Yeah.
Well, seeing as it's how it passed the top of the hour, I'm going to recede into the woodwork. This forum will stay live for another 2 hours as long as people want to keep it going. I'll be in listen mode, or I will go get something to eat. And anyone who likes to check out is welcome to check out. And lastly, Patricia, if you would like to, one of these upcoming Saturdays can definitely be given to you if you'd like to present some ideas and get some feedback.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great. Because like Glenn was just saying now, it seems like this is a great space for creativity as well, since there's a lot of ideas bouncing back and having some feedback, you know, about ideas, which is something that I really appreciate and value, you know. So having this kind of space and being able to share my ideas and projects, you know, like I did with Glenn already, you know, would be great.
Excellent. So if you have something already prepared that you'd like to share as an announcement, that would be great. Otherwise, craft something and announce it, and then we can put it into one of these upcoming Saturdays. Okay. That goes for Glenn, that goes for Barry, that goes for Colin, that goes for Tees, Alex, Stacy, anybody who's listening. Josh, I think Josh is still here. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going into listen mode.
I'm also going, guys. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on what Glenn said. One of the things I like to do is take a spectrum of things from one extreme to the other and sort of compare, polar opposites, and then where we are in the middle. I mentioned that a TED Talk tops out at about 18 minutes. A really well-prepared TED Talk might be 2,000 words uttered in a space of about 15 minutes. And if it's a good TED Talk, I will come away from with an understanding that I would call a mental model. For me, understanding means I've constructed and reposed a mental model of what I've heard. And I can get a very good mental model from a very good TED Talk of about 2,000 words in about 10 or 15 minutes. The other end of the spectrum, I can attend to a conversation that has 50,000 words over the space of hours and come away with a null model, literally nothing. At the end of it, I go, what did I learn? What could I remember? The answer is zero or nearly zero. So those are two extreme opposites of getting a lot out of something that's expressed briefly, succinctly in a few hundred to a few thousand words, and I can retain it. And the other end is I can be on the receiving end of a torrent of words and get nothing out of it. Somewhere in the middle is where I think we need to figure out how to operate in sessions like these Zoom sessions on GCC. And by the way, there's actually a metric. The metric that I use goes by the acronym ROWMIC, ROWMIC, and that stands for the ratio of words uttered to meaningful information conveyed. The ratio of words uttered to meaningful information conveyed. That's actually a number. The information can be measured in bits. And I like a very low ROWMIC number. It's like golf. The fewer the strokes and the more holes, the better.
Just on that point, Barry, about the amount of words uttered and the observations, it's like that saying about the lawyer. The lawyer never wins. A lawyer never loses. They either win or they learn. And when with AI, you have results in your AI algorithms, and they're enormously affected by the amount of data they have to work with. So the more you increase the amount of data, the greater likelihood your augmented intelligence is going to come up with something usable and relevant. Over. But yes, that is my checkout too, because I've got some other things to go and see to. Over.
I think the most important thing from a lot of words versus little words is how meaningful, is what is being said. So you can say things that are really meaningful in very short words, but it's about discerning what is relevant. Basically, it's about relevance. And for some of us, what is relevant is completely different, because we are all in different levels of what concerns us and where we are in life. So that will depend massively. So maybe this conversation, that thing that you listen for hours, that you gain no knowledge about, maybe it was relevant for somebody else, and because it's so what is the word? It depends on the person, basically. So yeah, that's why it's difficult. But when we delve into themes that are important in terms of systems, and that are recurrent as well, then you get the most relevance, you know. And that's why things like mythology is mostly relevant, because they are classical, they delve into classical problems, and then you find relevance. So yeah, so obviously it's the aim for us to be able to communicate the most universally relevant, but yeah, it's hard to expect from everybody, you know, and all the time. And it depends as well how prepared you are. If you prepare, if you think about what is really relevant and come to a session prepared, and you have what you want to talk about, then you are much more likely to be relevant. Like you were saying about Barry, you know, writing, making this document, and yeah. But we don't always have the time for that. Like I talk for myself, being a parent, you know, and I kind of struggle to be able to sit down and finding the time to do that.
I think it might have been Harry Truman who said, "I'm sorry to have written you such a long letter. If I had more time, I would have written you a much shorter letter."
Yeah, I think that sums it up really, because you're talking about quality communication, and it takes effort, which takes time. I guess it starts with the care, right? So yeah, well, it's nice that you came, Patricia. Have you watched many of the videos? No.
Zero. That's
It's
about the
interesting.
average, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you come with a clear project mindset, is trying to state, you know, obviously you people should decide what you want to do before you try to do it. And I think that's kind of what everybody tries to guide us towards. But focus is hard to hold on to, and it may be more productive in the future, because Sam definitely does seem to be moving more and more towards format, which is a good thing. And I just hope that the format's individual enough. So, because that has been the thing, with nobody being the leader, nobody making rules, then we're all on our best behavior to get along and try to share what I guess is the intention for collective intelligence. And so some people may put different words at the top of their vision, or the reason for becoming, as Barry would say. You know, what are you trying to become? You know, it's a powerful notion that we don't put too many rules or clamp down on that. So at the same time, it invites a lot of ideas from anywhere and anybody. So yeah, I like the idea of that we're going to be, I think I heard Sam say it again today, didn't I? That the format is we're going to write something up and prepare something before we present. Is that the idea? I think that's the idea. So Barry and Alex, they can confirm that. Did you hear that? The idea of writing something up, that's kind of new. That's been happening. And Kayla, have you met Kayla? No, she's got some different things that she's into, and one of the things that she does is teach dance, and she's got some I think Polynesian types of influence on some types of things. So she's going to be presenting, and it's been a couple of weeks, but she's been, so again, today was a makeshift day, but anyway, I won't keep you. I just I see Barry's gone and Alex is gone. I don't know if Barry's just gone to the toilet. I don't know what their plans are. Sometimes I do a little bit of a demo of where I am on the software as far as what I'm trying to do and searching. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I could give you a small demo where it's kind of is.
Sure.
Okay. Well, it's kind of broken where it is. I just changed the data back end. So essentially, I've automated everything, and now I've gone back and tweaked something in the very bottom, like in order to have things sorted by date. And let's see if I haven't run it yet on a lot of these. So I'm hoping, yeah, okay, this still works. If I run the tool, I'll break it right now. So what this is it's a search through the transcripts of the videos that we've recorded. So each transcript, I make a word cloud, and I put the matches for the word or phrase you're searching for. So here, searched for I need or I needed, right? And it found it 1,800 times in 491 files of 600 videos searched. Okay. So there's going to be 491 of these cards. So obviously this is not the end product. There's got to be, you know, a lot of work put into it. So this is kind of like just playing with Lego. And then I want to build a proper front end. So this is just basically displaying the results and trying to get things so people can see and use, because this can be used. The limitation is you can't put in your own search term right now and say, I would like to search for this term. But if I have requests, and this list on the side are all the search terms that get automatically generated in the different sections. So I call them mini corpus. So the GCC is one, Richard Feynman, Robert Sapolsky, Sam Han, you met him today, David Schmottenberger, he's sort of, so it's the idea is mentors and people. Also RChain and RCast. I don't know if you've heard about RChain. They're a co-op, and they are building some software like the blockchain, which is the first all-inclusive correct by construction, basically it's blockchain tool that you can write smart contracts for. And they actually have it. It was a year late, but it's been going on for a few years. I'm a member, but I'm not too close within. But anybody can join the co-op, and let's go to one of theirs. So here I searched for scale, and I have 25 of their files from their, what they do is they have what they call an RCast. So it's sort of like their podcast, an RCast. So I took their playlist, generated all the transcripts in word clouds, and then made it available to search. And we searched for scale, and here's one of them.
Says climate change.
I don't know if you can hear my audio.
Removal facility is set for Scotland. So basically what
Very well.
At 35 minutes into the video.
It's not the same as turning the ship around. Turning the ship around is another coordination.
So, you know, there's where he's talking about scale.
It's on the scale.
Interesting, all of these RCasts don't have video, but there is one that's more interesting. Although you don't need video. Correct by construction, I think. Yeah. Oh, what you got there,
A
Barry?
robot.
Oh,
I
nice.
have a chat bot that just came in the FedEx.
Okay.
It's a part of an experiment from MIT. I'm going to spend, I don't know all the protocols yet, but I'm going to have a conversation with this automated chat bot for the next, I don't know, several weeks or so. And then they're going to tell me whether or not it improved my emotional well-being.
That's incredible. Yeah. I have a serious relationship with my my Google speaker, the little thing. We're it's interesting. I use it as my immediate dictionary and all kinds of things, and we wrestle about how to talk. So it'll be interesting if that's any better.
I'll let you know.
Guys, I'm gonna have to go. I'm very sorry. Yeah, it was lovely to meet you, and hopefully we'll talk soon as well.
Yeah. See you.
Bye.
See you. Thanks for watching the prototype. I think Barry's going too, and I'm not going to sit here all alone. So we'll see you later.